next guest, I didn't know how much there was to learn about Arctic foxes. You know, those amazing creatures that we see on our, screensavers and stuff like that. We're going to get a more real look at the life of Arctic foxes with my next guest, Megan Perra. Come on out. Welcome.
Thank you. It's I've been trying not to talk about foxes for a while, so this is like a
coming back to it.
Yeah, no.
We're gonna talk about foxes.
Good, perfect. Yeah, I spare everyone just the whole story of it, but
yeah. So I got to listen to your story on a podcast recently, and this is just an excerpt of the work that you've been doing out of Iceland. Can we talk about that first?
Yeah. So that story kind of exemplifies the relationship that fox hunters in Iceland have with their foxes, and that they shoot them and they kill them, but they also idolize them. So that story specifically was about this three-legged fox that these guys were trying to get for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they did end up getting it, but it became famous.
Yeah.
And
mystical almost.
Yeah. They named him Tripod.
Yeah. So it was really cool in the story because you learn about, the bounty on foxes, or Arctic foxes, because they're killing the geese that we use for down feathers in our jackets and duvets.
Yeah, those are these eider ducks. So basically, if you buy a super expensive duvet or a really expensive jacket, it probably has eider down in it.
Yeah.
So these ducks come and nest on a farmer's property, and they're not that afraid of people when they're nesting. So these guys go up and they take the eider down and they collect it and then they sell it. And the foxes will come in and just like eat as many as many eiders as they can. So these guys will preemptively shoot foxes in the area to make it a bit of a safe space for their ducks. And the government kind of recognizes that the ducks are of economic value and the foxes aren't. So they pay people to go out and get rid of some of these pesky foxes. And Iceland is different than the rest of Scandinavia, and that the foxes aren't endangered there. They're actually like, if you go there and you see them, they're kind of like raccoons when they get habituated to people. Like they're super adorable, but they will come in and try and take your food. Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning. Your first trip to Iceland.
Right.
When you developed like everything that you've been doing for the past couple of years.
Yeah, so I first went to Iceland as an artist in residence in Skagastrand, which is in the northwest part of Iceland, and I had just finished a zoology degree. But I'd also taken these screen printing courses and decided that I wanted to be an artist. Like, that was my passion. So I went there with the intention of creating a body of work that I could sort of use as a jumping off point. And I sent this email to this fox researcher thinking like, oh, I'm sure that she gets these emails all the time, but like, we'll see what she says. And I sent her some pictures of my art, and I'm like, I'm kind of a scientist, but also an artist. I'm really interested in doing something science-based. And just like within a few days, she's like, yeah, come into the lab. Like, you can watch the dissections. And her name's Esther. She works at the Institute of Natural History in Reykjavik. And she gets a large portion of the foxes that are shot by these hunters. So I think the year I was there, she dissected 500 individuals.
Wow. Busy day.
Yeah. So she'll take like life history data, see how fat a fox is. She can look at the placental scars on the uterus and actually tell how many fox cubs that fox had the previous season. And then she'll take things like age. And that whole data set has been accumulated since her mentor started. And he started in the 80s, just in his garage. And I think they have somewhere around 11,000 specimens. So they can't keep everything just because you can't keep an entire dead fox. There's no space. But she keeps the lower jaw of each fox. So you have both of the lower jaws of each specimen. They're all labeled. They're basically in these boxes, like those file cabinets. just in the basement of the institute.
And having the lower jaw, does that help them study anything particular?
Yeah, actually, so what's interesting is that I think they just kept them for the record. They use the teeth for aging, but my friend who's doing a master's at the University of Calgary, she can look at the lower jaw and compare the symmetry in them and see if there's been a developmental disruption. So this gets back to kind of the core of the project, but asymmetry can be a sign that something has gone wrong during your development. That could be you were either too stressed, or maybe you were exposed to something like pollution. And it turns out that Arctic foxes in Iceland, the ones that live along the coast, are actually exposed to a lot of mercury. But there are also inland foxes that just eat ptarmigan. They don't eat any of the seafood that has mercury in it, and they have no exposure. Okay. So Iceland is like this perfect ecosystem with exposed and control. And then you have 11,000 fox mandibles in the basement of this random institute. Right. So I was talking to my friend about this, and she's like, you know, I could look at those and see if there's developmental damage that might be happening to these foxes that live along the coast. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is the project that I'm working on now, which is called Fox Scrim. So it's a documentary project about the research that I got my friend Maddie to do.
I'm going to stop you there. So you go to Iceland as an artist in resident. Right. You have a science background. Yeah. Then you start picking up the camera and start doing documentaries. There's a self-tape documentary on your website that's done extremely well. And that is just a preamble to what you're working on now. Yeah, so when I first went over there, while I was still abroad, I was abroad in Iceland for 3 months, I thought, you know, this is like doing a lot of storytelling stuff here. It kind of feels like science journalism. And then I saw this program for visual journalism at Concordia University in Montreal. And while I was abroad, I applied for that so I could go and acquire some of the skills I would need to come back and like work on a larger project about Esther and the foxes. And this has become a passion project.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to an annoying degree. Yeah.
So right now you're working on a documentary, and tell me a bit about the focus and the research of this documentary.
Yeah. So originally I went over thinking that this research part, this whole idea that maybe the foxes are being harmed by the mercury, would be like the backbone of the narrative. And then I got there, and it turns out all these hunters have really interesting stories. Yeah. And I was out in the West Fjords where a lot of the fox hunting happens because there are a lot of those eider ducks. So I was just kind of asking around, and I met this one guy who had previously done a documentary on it, and he's like, oh, you know, those guys who sit out there and shoot the foxes, like, they take turns watching over the eider ducks, and if it's their turn, while they're watching the fox, they're required to write a poem about the fox. Interesting. And then they come back and they have their coffee time and they share all this poetry. So there's those guys, for the eider farmers. Then there's this three-legged fox. Yeah. That these guys ended up just turning into kind of
like a mythical, like it almost seemed like a mythical creature.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how would a three-legged fox survive? Yeah. It's interesting. Well, it survived because it was eating all the bait that they were putting out to catch it, ironically, but.
This is great. So one more time, tell me the title of the documentary that you're working on right now.
So the documentary is called Fox Scrim, and online it's Icelandfox.com. Yeah. Easy to remember, and all of our social media stuff is just at Fox Scrim the movie. Yeah.
And you also have a Instagram page that displays your artwork that is fantastic and a great storytelling tool.
Yeah, so my like artistic company is Feral 5 Creative Company. So Feral as in wild, F-E-R-A-L, and then 5 the number, Creative Company. And that just shows, it's actually more updated than all the Fox Scrim stuff, but just the things I draw when I'm gallivanting around. And I have a solo show in La Grande next month at Art Center East. There'll be lots of fox-related work there.
Very cool. Bet you guys didn't know that much about Arctic foxes, did you? Megan, thank you so much for coming on. I love the work that you do and the passion that you put into it, and I'm really excited to see the work that you produce in the coming months.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Megan Perra, everybody. Marvin, you got it.